Hey everybody, welcome to Book of Katherine and October Season 2 Insider Movies Episode 2. So we are going to do a very special episode today, so it's not going to be a normal episode in which we're going to focus more on one movie than the others. So I'm going to give you all the movies kind of up front so that you know what they are and make sure that they all get attention right at the beginning. So as I said in the previous episodes leading up to this one, this time in October Season 2, we're going to be doing 4 different sections for October Insider Movies. And those sections are going to be classic Halloween movies, family Halloween movies, suspense Halloween movies, and then the horror genre, right? So it's going to be movies that you need to know, but in those 4 categories. So I have my little book here because I have to talk to my insiders and I never remember them all. I had to go over them. And remember, I'm wearing vintage, so I'm dressing up in vintage because remember, the Halloween colors are just, I try to do Halloween and just ended up looking goth, and I hit like horrible goth on me last year. If you're looking through those videos, not good at all. I was just like, because I taped them all in one night. Didn't know until afterwards. I was like, oh no. All right. So anyway, here are the movies for this week. We have week 2. We're going to be doing for family. We're going to be doing Secret of Nimh, which is not technically a Halloween movie, but there aren't a lot of kids movies. If you saw last year's kids movies, the kind of kids movies that used to be done that are real classics, we had like Charlie Brown and Nightmare Before Christmas and things like that, and they're very, very different. Then when you start going into the other movies that are not necessarily classics, like we started going through, like my insiders started showing me what they've been making more recently. And I was like, these are, now that we know like the agenda that they're doing to our schools, I mean, I literally was like, that would have given me nightmares. They're literally terrifying. Like they are meant to terrorize kids. And they started as early as like 2002. Made by even like Steven Spielberg did some, and they are not funny. They're not humorous. They're truly just meant to give kids nightmares. If you compare them with these like classics that we showed you, things like the Charlie Brown, like the kids, if you think about what they were raised on, looking at the older things, and then what they were suddenly thrown into, if they were born, unfortunately for them, after the UN took over things. I mean, that it really is, they were just in for a ride of terror. No wonder they're depressed and just emotionally destabilized if this is what they were raised on and told as kids' movies. And I told the insiders, I was just like, it's interesting. They went after the kids' movies first. They went after kids' movies first, with this type of messaging, which was really interesting. Because who would think if it's Spielberg and it's a kid's movie, why would you even think, to check it? Parents wouldn't be checking it. They just, at that point, they were just sitting their kids by the TV. But it's also why they didn't become classics. You know what I mean? Because classics are what the whole family can watch. So anyway, and they're not movies that you need to know, and they're not movies that directors talk about and go, oh, you need to watch these, and they're not ones that they aspire to. And I'm like, that's so fascinating. So Secret of Nimh isn't one of those movies that's like a classic Halloween movie, but it is on the scarier side for kids. It is a kids movie that you need to know, and it's perfect for the Halloween genre. It's, I guess, what we would call like a darker movie. Now, they used to actually show it in school, amazingly enough. It used to be shown in all the schools, like around Halloween and October time, in the fall time. It was a perfect fall time movie. Alongside Watership Down, which will be another movie that we're doing this time. So it's like a scary movie, but they used to show it to school kids all the time. And it was to expose them to, show them how to handle fear. Instead of terrorizing them, it taught them how to handle fear like a boss. And that's like emotion regulation, giving them the skills and coping tools to handle fear, be in a scary situation, and just handle it. And so it's an entertaining way. It shows them how to go into scary situations, things that they'll deal with in life, and actually handle them, and in a very, very well done, entertaining way. And Secret of Nimh is genius at that. I think it's one of the best cartoons ever made. So it's beautiful. I guess a younger version or a newer version, that would be Ferngully or something like that. That's kind of like scary, or Bambi if you want to go older. Ones that, you know, kind of deal with fear and stuff like that. So, so that's for family. And then for classics, we're doing Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And I'll get into that later. And then for horror, we're going to be doing for slasher or whatever, we're going to be doing Friday the 13th. Well, no, wait, for like scary, whatever. Well, one of them is going to be Friday the 13th. I don't know how to categorize them. Friday the 13th is kind of suspense. And then Event Horizon is going to be horror. I now that I've seen both of them, Friday the 13th and Event Horizon, like my insiders told me this one's this and this one's this. Now that I've seen both, I'm like, they're both kind of horror / like one's science fiction, one's kind of slasher. Like Friday the 13th, they're totally different. Like they're totally, completely, totally different. But like Friday the 13th is basically suspense. You're waiting. But it tells you at the outset, if you watch the trailer, it's like Friday the 13th, 13 people will die in this movie. 13 people will die. And this movie is about waiting and watching for all 13 people to die. And it's not even all that, like, it doesn't even like jump you all that much. It's just kind of like, but because the storytelling is done so well, it ended up being like a huge, big classic. It ended up doing extremely well because the story was just told that well. It just led you up, and then it even kind of was like, here, this is the next person, and then you kind of waited, and then like, and the blood was bad, but it kind of prepared you for it. So if someone didn't want to see it, they knew when to close their eyes, the whole 9 yards. You could handle it, and I actually, for me as someone who can't handle scary movies, I actually was able to handle it. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I was like, you gotta be kidding, but I was able to turn away when I needed to turn away. Do you know what I mean? Like, I was like, okay. And I remember at one point, I got upset and I was like, why don't they have any of this in movies? Like, why don't they do anything? And it ended up like, people got this smile on their face, and I was like, what? Like, what did I miss? And then it turned out like, that's what they had. And I was kind of like, oh, like it was just that good of a movie that it was doing some of the things that, you know, now that I'm seeing these horror films, I'm seeing things that always happen. Like spigots don't always work. Like in all, you know, horror movies, like piping just never works. And I'm just like banging my head against a wall. But it's some people's deal. I just get it. And they're just like, girl, you don't understand. That's just the way it is. I'm like, right. Like there are some really diehard people that really love scary movies. And then Event Horizon, in which things didn't work. Even in space, like, oh, the somehow they managed to get into an actual bathroom in a normal world. Somehow they managed to have a dream where they're in a bathroom where, gee, it didn't work. I'm just like, you gotta be joking. So I was like, wow, you just, who wrote the rule book that you gotta have a faucet that just doesn't pour water? Someone wrote that rule book. I don't know who wrote the rule book about scary movies. So anyway, so Event Horizon, and Event Horizon is the one that I'm going to be focusing on more today. So, and then Invasion of the Body Snatchers. So, I guess I should talk about that now. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, it was a 1958 movie. There were like 3 more, not sequels. Well, the next one was a sequel, and it was actually a very, very good sequel. It kind of picked up where it left off. It was actually extremely well done. It's just it's been handled very well in the aftermath or whatever. But I think it's actually very relevant. Invasion of the Body Snatchers. It's a classic. I think you guys will really enjoy it. Part of it is because it came right at the time of the Red Scare, and it will blow your mind because the whole fear of it, of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the entire terror of it and why it scared everybody is because they invaded people and made them all think the same and act the same, like PC. Like talk the same, use the same language, act the same way, Like that was the big fear, was that no one, like everyone would live the same, which is exactly how we're like doing now. Like that's really what PC is asking for us to all talk the same and live the same. Like that's exactly what it's asking for. If you think about it and you talk to the Russian, if you listen to the tapes, the Russians will tell you that they love PC. It's what they use to control the population is political correctness. They actually use that term. And same with Mao's China, political correctness to control their populations. Like that's what they used in both populations. And because they have our media, the media doesn't report that that's what both of them use, but you will find tapes online of the upper echelon of the military on both sides saying we use political correctness in the 50s and 60s and early 40s to control their populations, to keep them socialist and keep them one body, one mind, like, And it's fascinating to me that, that I think that's the thing that I go after the reason why I go after the atheists is the one thing that I talk to atheists about, because I don't think you guys understand that the money funding behind the atheist speakers, just like the money behind the church speakers, like Soros funded the church speakers, the money that's funding the atheist speakers, those are the same things in atheism that's funding, like in both socialist China and in socialist Russia. There's like no religion, you have to swear there's no God, there's only the state. And that's exactly like they sent people out to say there is no God. And that was what made America different, was that you could have any God you wanted. And so that's the thing, is that I'm like, it was a big switch over when all of a sudden we had an atheist movement that came in and started telling people you couldn't have a God, and started arguing against people and saying you're stupid for having a God, so you're stupid, and going into people's others' lives and going online and flaming at people for having a faith or having a God or whatever it was that they had. That's the only thing that I have. Like, James Randi even started crossing over into that line later in life. He didn't do that earlier in life, but later in life, he even started crossing over into that path. And I was just like, what's happened? Like, and I know that that's the money behind it, but the same thing has happened on the church side. Like the church side used to be about happening, like all the pastors came through, and they used to be about helping others and compassion and reaching out and doing drug rehabilitation program and funding 12 steps and stuff like that. And now they're completely focused on themselves and focused on their cores and their values and focused on if they're living right and doing all these things. And, oh, do you have this, and this? Like I had one friend that she was living in a church before we left California, and they were like every church, she was trying to find a church in Northern California. I'll never forget it. And she said she tried 5 churches, and all the churches in liberal Northern California, every church was like, do you have kids? Why don't you have kids yet? Like they wanted to know why they didn't have kids yet. And I was just like, churches are, asking if you have kids yet? Like how? Like when did we go back to the 1950s? Like that really freaked me out. Do you know what I mean? So like, It is this whole, like, all of us, we have to be really, really aware of when people are telling you, like, the United States of America is like, do your own thing, live free, and the invasion of the baddie snatchers shows you how in 1958, that was our greatest fear. They were writing movies about how, like, our biggest terror was actually being able to, terror was being taken over and made to think the same way. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting that that was our greatest fear? That's what drove, and they knew that would make a movie successful. Isn't that fascinating? And some people said there was a political motivation behind it. Some people said there wasn't. And I'm just like, no, look at the film on its own. And the film would not have been successful if the people of the United States and the country of the United States were not scared about what the movie said itself. We didn't have like a media back then that was spreading out about what the people were behind the scenes of the movie. We didn't have an entire thing like that where they were like, here's what the director said, and here's what the studio said, and we didn't have anything like that. We didn't have YouTube with clips of behind the scenes and outtakes, and we only had the film. The film went to theaters, and that's all they saw. So I really want you to watch the film and just see that and see what you think, and see why that film would like be so successful. You know, because today, would that be a terror? Would that be such a big, terrifying thing? You know, living all the same and living by the same rules and everything. Well, why are we doing it with PC? Why do we get so mad at people when they live outside of these boundaries we have set up? And who set up those boundaries? And when they move the goalpost, who is it that's moving these goalposts? When do they set the goalposts? What if all of a sudden this invisible head, whoever it is, suddenly says, okay, it's all right to have, teenage sex at 13 now? What if whoever's up here suddenly says it's all right to have it at 12? Because they're constantly changing this goalpost for us. You know what I mean? Like, what if they say it's all right for all of a sudden, for kids not to go to school? There's some big voice just determining things. The same voice that just said, hey, everyone recycle and everyone adopt recycling. And now we've identified that as the UN, that we know there's other people around it. But, that's socialism telling all of us to live one way and we need to get back to freedom. And I wanted to say that, like, what is the solution? The solution is the solution is primaries. It's not election day. I thought it was so interesting that I know I'm getting off here, but I thought it was so interesting that Bernie Sanders was like, we should name election day a national holiday. And I was like, yeah, that's socialism, isn't it? Because every European country has only one election day. They're the most socialist, least democratic democracies in the world. They have one election day because they don't have any control over their local government. They don't have any control over their state government. They have one election a year and that's all they get. And when they get that vote, then their elected officials get to run rampant for the rest of the year. But in our states, we're the only nation in the world who has actually democratic control over our local government, over our school boards, over every little part of our lives. Well, those elections happen, they can happen sometimes every month. So some states can have 20 election days a year. But Bernie Sanders is saying we should name election day a national holiday. What does that do? That makes everyone think that there's one election day. And that's why he's saying that, because our primary days and our other election days are the days we can vote him out of office, and all these corrupt officials, we can run them out of office. Those other election days outside of election day on November 6th, all the other election days are what make us different from the rest of the world. All those other election days are what make us different from the rest of the world. And when you make just one a national holiday, all the other ones fall away. They think that's the election day, not all the others. And it puts more importance on this day than all the others, when in reality, the others are more important than this day. This is when the race starts. The primary is when the race begins. This is the final. This is the prelims. This is the preliminary race. This is the most important day. But the reason he's saying that is because so many incumbents got voted out. That's when all the big budget people lost their big, huge money, all the people they've bought off. And so if you can distract people and say only vote on the finals, it was very cleverly done. And it's really scary. We have to focus on all those days when your school board is, and they put a school board election on a different day. But if you can run for all those little elections and make sure you start running for, if you can get a state office or a state this, or just start running in your local governments and hold at least one position in your local town or your local government, you will be shocked at the amount of corruption you will end. And when someone tells you, well, that's the way it used to be done, you could be like, that's the way it used to be done. Thank you. And it ends there. And that is a way that we change from the UN to the United States of America again. It's the only way. Moving on. So let's talk about Event Horizon. So there is this guy, I believe his name was James Gunn. And so I watched Event Horizon, and this is what I want to talk about today. It's the main thing. And you may be like, why am I talking about James Gunn? I believe his name is James Gunn. I know the last name is Gunn, Gunn. And he is the director of a Disney movie, a big Disney movie coming up for kids. I believe it's don't quote me on it, but I believe it was Guardians of the Galaxy or something like that. Big kids movie or whatever. Now, the thing is that, let me go ahead. I'm going to get all these facts straight for you. Let me go ahead and check. Hold on. So I think I'm going to do another episode on this. So I'll do a part 2. So it is James Gunn, and I'll do part 2, and then I'll link it below when I'm done. But I don't think James Gunn would be where he is if it weren't for Event Horizon. You know, it is a space flick, but it ends with chopped body parts hung in midair, which, if you know anything about Hollywood and the history, it's a sharp turn into the dark. And now James Gunn is directing kids' films, and it wouldn't have happened if they hadn't done this turn into the dark. And I want to talk about that. So I'll talk about that in part 2. Anyway, so those are the 4 films that we're doing, and I hope you like the vintage, but I'll continue reading the vintage into the next part. So I love you guys so much, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye. Oh, and watch these videos here, and donate down below, and help these videos keep going so I can keep doing this and stay healthy for you. All right, love you so much. Bye.